Welcome. We are about to get into one of the heaviest hitters in the philosophy of religion, the problem of evil. Seriously, if God is perfect, then why is the world so full of suffering? It's a huge question. Okay, let's jump right in. So, here's our game plan. We're going to break this down into 4 chunks. First, we'll get a handle on the problem itself. Then, we'll look at the 2 main ways it's framed. After that, we'll explore a couple of major defenses. And finally, and this is the important bit, we'll evaluate them. Honestly, this structure is basically a blueprint for a top-grade essay, so it should really help you get your thoughts in order for the exam. All right, part 1, the ultimate problem. Before we get lost in the philosophical arguments, we really need to feel the weight of this. This isn't just some abstract puzzle for academics. For anyone with faith, this is a real, personal, and deeply difficult challenge to the idea of a God who is both all-powerful and all-loving. And to bring this right down to earth, just look at these 2 kinds of suffering. On one hand, you have the unbelievable destruction from something like the Fukushima tsunami. That's natural evil. It's just built into the way the world works. But then you have something like the September 11th attacks. That's moral evil, caused entirely by human choices. The thing is, both of them make you ask the exact same questions. How can this happen? And how can a good, all-powerful God coexist with this level of pain? Now, for your A-level, it is absolutely crucial that you get this next bit. Philosophers have come at this problem from 2 very different angles. Nailing these definitions is going to be key for locking in those AO1 knowledge marks. So let's start with the logical problem. The ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus basically laid it all out thousands of years ago, and David Hume made this quote famous. It's so powerful because it's so simple. It presents this killer dilemma, arguing that the existence of any evil at all creates a direct, logical contradiction with what people say God is like. And this diagram just illustrates that contradiction perfectly. This is the famous inconsistent triad. The argument is simple. You can pick any 2 of these statements, but you can't have all 3 at the same time, right? If God is all-powerful and all-loving, evil shouldn't exist. If evil exists and God is all-loving, well, he can't be all-powerful. And if evil exists and God is all-powerful, then he can't be all-loving. The takeaway here is that the logical problem argues the whole concept of the God of classical theism just doesn't add up. It's incoherent. Okay, so let's make sure we're crystal clear on the difference. The logical problem is a philosophical puzzle, an a priori argument. That just means it's based on pure logic before you even look at the world. The evidential problem, though, is a posteriori. It's all about experience. It says, forget the logic for a second, just look around. It points to the staggering amount, the intensity, and the randomness of suffering, like a fawn burning to death in a forest fire, and says all of this is overwhelming evidence that makes God's existence really, really unlikely. So, with these massive challenges on the table, it's no surprise that theologians have come up with some pretty powerful responses. They've tried to defend God's goodness, and these defenses have a special name, a key term you are definitely going to need. And that name is theodicy. Make sure you know this one. A theodicy is basically an attempt to answer that big question. Why would a good God allow evil to exist? We're going to look at 2 of the most important theodicies for your spec. One from Augustine and one from John Hick. Right, let's get into Augustine. His argument starts with the idea that God created a totally perfect world. So, where did things go wrong? Well, Augustine blames the misuse of free will, first by angels and then by Adam and Eve in what's known as the fall. This one act of disobedience, this original sin, basically broke everything. It corrupted humanity and it corrupted the natural world itself. So for Augustine, every bit of evil we see, both moral and natural, is the fair and just punishment for that first sin. It's called a soul-deciding theodicy because our ultimate fate hangs on whether we accept God's escape plan through Jesus. And this leads us to Augustine's most clever philosophical move. See, to get God off the hook for creating evil, he basically redefines it. He calls it privation boni, a privation of good. What does that mean? It means evil isn't a thing. It's not a substance that God made. It's simply a lack of the good that's supposed to be there. Think about it like this. Darkness isn't really a thing, is it? It's just the absence of light. This is a direct shot at the logical problem, because it means God never created evil in the first place. Okay, on to our second defense. This one comes from a 20th century philosopher, John Hick, but he built on the ideas of a much earlier thinker named Irenaeus. Now, Hick completely rejects Augustine's idea of a perfect world that went wrong. He says, instead, that we were made in God's image, with potential, but we have to grow into his likeness. So this world, with all its pain and its challenges, is what he calls a vale of soul-making. It's basically a spiritual gym, a place designed to help us develop real virtues like compassion and courage. And for that to work, we need real freedom, which is why God keeps what Hick calls an epistemic distance. He doesn't make his existence totally obvious, so we have to freely choose to do good. Okay, so we've got our two main defenses on the board. Now it's time for the really crucial part, the AO2 evaluation. This is where you have to pick them apart, analyze their strengths, and expose their weaknesses. Let's think of it like we're putting God on trial, and Augustine and Hick are the lawyers for the defense.
So let's step inside the courtroom and start weighing the evidence. First, we'll hear the case for the prosecution, all the reasons these theodicies might fail. And then we'll hear from the defense, the arguments for why they might just work. First up, Augustine. The defense's star witness is that privateo boni idea, which on the surface seems to make the logical problem just disappear. But the prosecution has some tough questions. For starters, if the world was genuinely perfect, how did anyone even get the idea to choose evil? Where did that knowledge come from? And maybe the biggest blow, Augustine's whole case relies on a literal reading of Genesis, which flies in the face of modern science. Evolution shows life moving from simple to complex, not falling away from some initial perfection. Now let's turn to Hick. The single biggest challenge to his whole soul-making idea is the sheer reality of suffering, the evidential problem. And honestly, I don't think anyone has ever put it more powerfully than Dostoevsky in his novel The Brothers Karamazov. The character Ivan says that no amount of heavenly reward in the future could ever possibly justify the terrible, pointless suffering of just one innocent child. He famously says he would return his ticket to heaven. It's a gut punch of an argument.
So, let's put Hick's argument in the dock. The defense says, look, this gives suffering a purpose. It's for our own good, to build character. But the prosecution's case is brutal. First, does soul-making really need this much pain, as Hume would ask? Is the scale of suffering proportionate? Second, what about the suffering of animals or babies who have no chance to develop spiritually? It seems completely pointless. And finally, as the philosopher D.Z. Phillips argued, would a genuinely loving God really use suffering as a tool to achieve his aims? That seems to twist the very meaning of love. So, what's the verdict? Well, both Augustine and Hick offer these really clever logical frameworks, but it feels like they both start to crumble when you hold them up against the raw, horrifying reality of suffering in the world. In the end, it seems the evidential problem, the challenge that comes from our own experience, is still the most powerful objection that just won't go away. And so I want to leave you with this final thought, a question that really gets to the very heart of this entire debate. It's the core of the free will defense. Is a world where we have genuine freedom, where we can choose both incredible courage and unbelievable cruelty, is that world, with all its risks, ultimately better than a perfect paradise full of puppets who can't choose at all? That's the question you have to wrestle with.